Time to make some horrible ladder predictions, and we'll reflect upon it at the end of the year and see how badly we went. It's just a little bit of fun. I'm not going to go with the status quo. I'm going to go against the grain a little bit and upset a few fan bases. So stick around if you are not a Collingwood fan and hear my 2 cents on why I think your team sucks. So we'll start with 18th, and we're not going to go lightly on West Coast Eagles, and I don't have a vendetta against them. Yes, they beat us in 2018, but we made up for it in 2023, so it has nothing to do with that. I'm worried for players like Oscar Allen. News came out in the offseason that he was struggling with a knee injury, and a specialist deemed his knee to be had similar characteristics to that of a 40-year-old. So that's not promising. Does Jake Waterman have it in him to have a year that he did like last season just gone by? I'm not too sure. It was good to see players like Elliot Yeo and McGovern and Tim Kelly find continuity on the field. So that's good. They also brought in, let's have a look here. They brought in Bo Allen and Job Shanahan, and always, of course, also Malachi Champion. So Job Shanahan is a great forward. He played for the Northern Knights. So maybe a bit of a backup plan in case Oscar Allen does not get up for season 2025. And maybe they bleed Job in quite quickly. And Bo Allen, a really important injection into their midfield, which needs a bit more diversity. I know Ruben Jinby has moved to the half back line, or was more of a key position defender, whereas previously he was that midfielder. So maybe just looking for a bit more balance there in their midfield. So I still have them 18th. Could they find themselves working up a little bit? Maybe, but I just feel like besides the bottom 5, the rest of the league is very, very competitive. And you could argue that all 18 teams are. We'll move on to 17th placed Richmond. And they've brought in a bunch of draftees. Who'd they bring in? They brought in Harry Armstrong, who's arguably the best forward in the draft pool. They brought Jonty Fall, who also was a bit of a bolter, but was a quite highly touted forward in that draft as well. Josh Smiley fell at pick 7. Someone said he shares characteristics to that of Patrick Cripps and Marcus Bontempelli. It was, who's the expert dude, and not Cal Twomey, the older gentleman. He said he shares characteristics of that of Patrick Cripps and Bontempelli. I don't know if you can put Bont and Patrick Cripps in the same sentence, though. They're two completely different players. But anyways, Luke Traynor as well, really good key defender, so he'll provide competition, or might even get a start with Noel Bolter facing suspension. Who else to have? Lawler, pick number 1. Taj Houghton is recovering from an ACL, but he was a top 5 draft pick before he did his knee. And then finally, Thomas Sims, another great forward from the Northern Knights. And I really liked him, watching him in the national championships. Plays really tall, can pinch hit in a ruck, and we're keeping a close eye on most of these draftees for Richmond. It'll be interesting to see what this draft pool does in their career, because this bracket of players for Richmond could make or break the next 5, 10, 15 years, okay? 16th, here's probably one that people or this team isn't going to like. I've got Essendon at 16th. I really do. What did they do in the offseason? They offloaded Jake Stringer. Maybe that works. Maybe they're looking for someone like Isaac Keiko, although a different type of player, to provide that missing allotment of goals that Jake Stringer provided. What, kicked 40-odd goals in 2024. They brought in Jaden Ewan, who was spoken about quite heavily early in 2024 and then sort of fell off the face of the earth and got drafted quite late. They also got Lewis Hayes, who was a St Kilda forward, and for those who are Collingwood fans watching this, he absolutely teared us a new one in 2022, the first round, when Nick Dacos debuted. So a decent little acquisition there. And Cale Gerian, who might be a handy pickup. I personally don't rate Sam Draper. I don't think he's that good. I don't know if it's because he's a cult figure that he's more respected. I'm not too sure. I just don't rate him. And I think Cale Gerian, I think he was one of, if not the best ruckman in a draft pool. So maybe an opportunity there in 2025. Zach Johnson, another player that we did some research on and made a video and a video analysis on Pies Footy. So if you want to check that out, unfortunately he fell to the Bombers very late in the draft. I think Collingwood did not have room on their list and passed and did a pick swap with Bulldogs. So we don't get Zach Johnson, unfortunately. The question is, can players like Harrison Jones, Zach Reid, who's had injuries, Nate Caddy, Elijah Sardis, and then Nick Cox as well, and Ben Hobbs, if you want to add him into there, can they do anything to avoid a bottom four finish next year? I just thought they would add to their midfield stocks, which they haven't quite done that. Who have they got in their midfield right now? I know they've got Zach Merritt. Who else? They got Ben Hobbs, there's Zach Johnson, Dersma's a winger, Will Setterfield, Durham, who was a shining light in 2025. I think they're gambling on or hoping that Dylan Shield can come back and have a really good season in 2025. Darcy Parish, Gresham's more of a forward these days. So that's what we're working with at the Bombers, and that's why I've got them at 16th. At number 15, I've got Geelong. I don't know how their fan base will take that. I'm just hoping that they have a down year. Yeah, they missed finals in 2023, but was it a down year? They had injuries. I want to see them sucker a little bit. That's the only logic behind it. They didn't have a whole lot cooking in the draft. They got Joe Pike, who was a mid-season draftee, hopeful last year, and everyone thought he was going to get drafted. He didn't end up getting drafted, but from Geelong Falcons, they've now picked him up, maybe put him on the rookie list, or did they actually draft him in the national draft? I'm not too sure, but either or, doesn't matter. Who are their oldest players? Let's see. Reece Stanley, Patrick Dangerfield. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 players over the age of 30. Keep that in mind. 8 players over 30, and we'll consider that when we get to Collingwood's placing. But yeah, Geelong at 15. And then a slight improvement for North Melbourne. But this is a team I can just see springboarding into the top 8. I know that's crazy to say. They got Matt Whitlock, who's a key defender in the draft. Who else did they get? I'm not entirely familiar with all the names, but Finn O'Sullivan, top 2, top 3, wasn't he? So he could bolster their midfield right away. Harry Sheasel is almost as good as Nick Dacos and will boost their hopes in 2025. They've got Charlie Comben, who was not came out of nowhere, but really solidified their back line last year. So hopefully they can lean on him a little bit more moving forward. Yeah, it'll be interesting. Well, Luke Davies Jr. Okay, you know what? If North finish 14th on the ladder, maybe we get Luke Davies Jr. Maybe that's not enough. That won't be enough for LDU to stay. No way. I'll tell you right now. If they finish 14th, it's not enough. 13th placed. This one is going to be upsetting as well. I've got St Kilda at 13th. And they're another team I've got in the bracket that they could finish as low as 13, but they also could make top 8, top 6, right? They got, how do you spell his name? Alexander Toru, the key defender, the best intercepting defender in the draft. If he can get the wheels rolling early and replace the gaping hole that Josh Battle has left, it will be a huge win for the Saints. They didn't really draft midfielders, so to speak. They drafted Toby Travalia, who maybe could become a midfielder in the long term. And then they drafted James Barrett as well, who's a key defender, and then maybe one more midfielder late in the draft. But the big coup for them in the offseason was Jackson McRae. And I think that's going to be a highly underrated pickup for St Kilda. Maybe it gets them to the promised land, back into the finals and maybe a prelim final. But right now I've got them at 13th. And we're going to keep Carlton out of the 8 and have them placed at 12th. They've got Jagger Smith into the team. They've got Harry O'Farrell, and we spoke to great extent about that man. We wanted him in black and white. They got the Camporellis. They got rid of Matt Owies. I just think if someone like Patrick Cripps, you could say this for most teams, but if Patrick Cripps gets injured, what do Carlton do with their midfield? Who's going to win the contested ball? Can Sam Walsh become an inside player like Nick Dacos did in 2024? I would just like to see Carlton miss out. That's all. That's my rationale. It's nothing. Not a whole lot of logistics to it, and there's not a whole lot of logistics to this fucking ladder anyway. So I'm going to put them in 12. Who would have thought Collingwood weren't going to make the 8 in 2024? We all had them top 2. So fuck it. I'm going to see you, Carlton. Bottom out of 8. I'm sorry. All right. 11th placed, Port Adelaide. I think they had an overs season in 2024. I know they've got players like Zach Butters, Connor Rozee, but 2 of their other highest performing players, according to the player ratings last year, was players like Travis Boak, Ollie Wines. Travis Boak, 37, Ollie Wines getting there. They lose Charlie Dixon, and they gave up Dan Hewson. They choked it up. They had to offload him. They couldn't keep him because he wanted to go, and this was the best deal they were going to get. They got Jack Lukosius. Can they turn him into something more than what he has been? But Jason Horne-Francis, he's a genuine superstar of the league. So once again, I've got them at 11th, but they could also be top 4. But I'm going to go with my gut. I've got them at 11th. I think they had an overs year, and they're going to have a year to recuperate. Ken Hinkley maybe loses his job by the end of the year, and then they'll come back into the thick of things in 2026. This one will be surprising, a positive surprise for this club. And I've got Melbourne at 10th. Once again, a club that could make the top 8. I just think that their list is too good to be beneath where they finished last year. They had a lot of dramas: Christian Petrarca, Clayton Oliver, Joel Smith with the gear in the off season, all that sort of stuff. They got Stephen May. Tom McDonald had a good year as a key defender. Cozzy Pickett's there. Christian Salem came in late. Like, he missed, the first couple games at least, I would imagine. Or they tried him in the midfield, then they put him back to the back line. And they drafted well. They did draft well this time around. They got Harvey Langford in the top 10 as well as Xavier Lindsay. And I think they're going to have immediate impact. I feel like the draftees these days, the top 5, top 10, they're almost just thrown in and they look like seasoned veterans. When you look at the top 3s, Jason Horne-Francis is coming to his own. Nick Dacos, Harry Sheasel. Who else was a Windsor? Caleb Windsor for Melbourne was really good last year. Caleb Wilson or Darcy Wilson for St Kilda was great. So they've got a couple players who can come in almost immediately and do a job. So I've got them at 10th. And then number 9th, this is more to do with the mentality, how they've probably been broken down. Nothing to do with their list. Their list is great, but it's Sydney. You could probably argue their forward line, their key tall depths are lacking, and they're quite dependent on players like Lewis Melican, Aaron Francis, McCartan, Amadi, and Logan McDonald to continue doing well, and Logan McDonald in particular to rise to another level. But I think they're just mentally shot. I think they need another year off like they did in 23. No, they played, didn't they? They played the elimination final. Anyways, I've got them 9th. And I've got a team who's been crying out for finals footy for quite some time. Maybe the last time they played finals footy was 2017, and that's Adelaide. Who did they draft? Let's see. Sid Draper, going to go really well in the midfield. And I think maybe Tyler Welsh. So Daniel Curtin was also a prize pick in the previous draft and only played 7 games. So they're really just grooming him to be ready, hopefully, for this year. I think they just play too exciting for them to miss out on finals, and that's why I want them in the finals. I like fast footy. They move it well. They've just got to work on their defense. I mean, what do they have defensively? But he played... What did he play? He played 15 games. Who played minimal games? Thilthorpe only played 7 because of an injury. Burgess is a forward. Nick Murray only played 9 games. Mark Heen's going to get better. Josh Worrell's great. So they've got some players to bring back. Who else missed out? Was it Duday? But he's somewhere else now, isn't he? I forget where he's gone, Duday. Anyways, I've got them at 8th. And then number 7, we're going to have the Western Bulldogs. They always just find themselves in this position. But they've got really good, genuine top-end talent. You look at Bont, you look at Norton, who was disappointing, Ugle Hagen. Sam Darcy's going to be one to watch. And if Rory Lobb can solidify their backline problems, and maybe they can make the top 4. But Brisbane did it out of the... Didn't Brisbane do it from outside of the top 4 this year just gone by? So with that extra week off that you get going into the final series, that top 4 position is still desirable, but it's not as coveted as it has been in the past. So Bulldogs 7, and then here we go, finals for the first time for this team, Gold Coast. It's finals or bust for them, isn't it? Really, for Dimmer. He put a timeline on it. They got John Noble, they got Dan Rioli. They drafted very well through the academy, Lombard. Who else did they get? I mean, that was pretty much it. They really didn't have to do a whole lot more. They've already got players like Matt Rao, Noah Anderson, Ned Moyle, who we wanted, but unfortunately extended his contract, even though Jared Witts is still playing. Miller, who was down compared to his previous seasons. And they're looking at players like Sam Flanders to continue to rise, and a whole bunch of Mac Andrew. I mean, come on. How can this team not make the 8, right? Let's move on to number 5, and I've got Brisbane Lions. Simply, they've won the flag, similar to Collingwood and other teams, Geelong. I don't think they fall out of the 8, so I've got them at 5th still. I think they're still great, too great of a side. Cal Shadir is going to grow into that absence that Joe Danaher's left. It's not Cal Shadir, it's... What's that gentleman's name? Where is he? Logan Morris. Sorry, they always get the two mixed up. But they got Sam Day as well, who was delisted from Gold Coast. Hipwood's going to have to rise to another level. And then they brought in little Levi Ashcroft, brother of Will, and they got Sam Marshall, who was best on in the Coates Talent League Grand Final. So they've just brought in ready-made talent once again, and that's why I don't have them falling out of the 8 just yet. Okay, number 4, and it is the good old Collingwood forever. We've got them at 4th place. Gets us a double chance. That's all I care about, okay? Let's have a look. So Geelong had 8. Okay, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 players over the age of 30. And most of them would be in our best 22. So just goes to show how important of a year it is that our younger cattle rise to the occasion. I would like to see one of our 3 draftees play 5 or more games. I'd like to see Dimatia play 10. Illaru, still a bit of a project. TJ gets 5 games. Ed Allen needs to play 15 or more. Jacob Ryan, 5 or more. Harrison plays when he gets back. Ned Long, I'm not too sure. Oscar Steen, I want to see what he's about in those intra-clubs and practice matches. And the Reef McInnes hopefully holds down a position in the key backstocks. Will Parker as well. So those are the players we're really hinging our hopes on to solidify their spot in the starting 23 to make up for those elderly players who you'd expect almost 4 or 5 of them to potentially retire at the end of this year. Number 3, our bogey team, Hawthorn. They're just, yeah. We beat them last year and the year before that. I think we played them twice in 2023. We played them twice last year. But it's just the way they beat us and the way they beat Carlton, the way they built. All right, let me say it. My tongue's not working. The way they beat Carlton as well scares me. They brought in Josh Battle. They got Tom Barras into the team. Who else? Who'd they draft? Noah Mraz, a good key defender who will probably have to bide his time in the VFL, given they've brought in these great players like Barras and Battle. I've got them at 3. The lens will be focusing on them much more this year relative to last year. So can they handle the heat? They're going to be studied to the nth degree, whereas last year would have been a different story. They had no pressure. They were playing with absolute freedom. Now they've got standards and expectations put upon them for 2025. And number 2, one of the better up-and-coming young teams, Fremantle. I think it's time did they just miss the finals? I think it's time they make finals, and I think it's time they make top 4. They've got Charlie Nichols from the draft, Murphy Reed, who, God, he slid quite a bit in my opinion, and could really prove to be a draft steal for Fremantle. And I think while they have Nat Fyfe there, Walters, Ryan, Brayshaw, and they've brought in Shea Bolton, it's time for them to go. Luke Jackson, Darcy, these guys, it's time for them to really have a crack at being a competitive side within the top 8, okay? Number 1, I've got GWS. I just think they're balanced. They've got Sam Taylor in the back line. Jack Buckley was unbelievable. Lee Kalia had moments. It's time for Cadman. Jake Riccardi was great. Jesse Hogan, arguably the best forward in the league. And then they're like medium-sized stocks across the ground. Connor Iden, Harry Himmelberg. Who else is there? From the forward line is crazy. And the draftees they brought were all utility players who play that medium to small size. You got Callum Brown there. Brent Daniels, the best small forward in the league. And then if we look at the draft, just so I can remind myself, Harrison Oliver, Cody Angrove, Jack O as well, who's a bit bigger, 194. They've just got a really balanced team. They've missed a couple grand finals by the slimmest of margins. I think it's time they get an opportunity again to vindicate that grand final loss against Richmond. So that's my ladder. I had a bit of fun with it. I hope I made sense of some of my rationale, some not so much. But let me know what you think in the comment section, and we will see you guys soon. Go Pies.